Welcome to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
It is 4th of July weekend,
Which means it is the 159th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg.
Day 2. There are events all over town.
And there are reenactors and living history enthusiasts everywhere. These ones actually spent the entire night camping out here on part of the battlefield just next to the Union headquarters.
And there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of people visiting the town and the battlefield today,
commemorating the soldiers who fought and died here, celebrating the Union victory that helped to preserve the Union.
And some of them, no doubt whole families of them, are just out here to have a good time. And who can blame them?
After all, as we've seen over the past couple of visits, Gettysburg, the town, has got candy stores and cigar shops and ice cream and restaurants.
Museums everywhere, history everywhere you look, especially around this field right now, this weekend during the anniversary.
They've got everything the soldiers had back then, the weapons, the campfires, the equipment, and even some things
the soldiers mostly didn't have in camp.
because there are a lot of ladies out here in this soldiers' camp today.
I guess they can't resist a man in uniform. I gotta get me a uniform.
Check this out, we got a drum and fife band here with the reenactors. Let's listen.
Modern Gettysburg has a lot of attractions, especially, as I said, on an anniversary weekend like this. But it also has a long history of attractions for tourists going all the way back almost to just after the battle itself. And today I want to talk about an attraction that is no longer in Gettysburg today, but is fascinating. And even though it hasn't been gone, relatively speaking, all that long, it's very little remembered today. By the 1940s and 50s, after World War II, when car culture was sweeping the nation, so was tourist culture. Roadside attractions, little motels, roadside diners, the highways were littered with them, particularly around national parks and historic sites.
And Gettysburg was no exception. Today's Gettysburg is a good balance between the historic and the modern tourist stuff.
But it wasn't always that way. Like I showed you last time, General Lee's headquarters used to be part of a motel.
Over the years, all kinds of things from armed forces bases to motels to literally a Stuckey's have been removed from the battlefield.
There's still a lot of modern stuff like this giant hotel right there in the way, in between sites of the battle. But for the most part, Gettysburg now has managed to strike a better balance between the modern and the tourist-friendly and the historic. Back here at the Soldiers Reenactment Camp, we're actually located right along the Tawnytown Road. And this regiment of soldiers was just out in the field drilling and marching very admirably.
It was a very cool sight to behold, especially when they charged.
You'll notice in the background while they were drilling, you didn't see much modern stuff except for the Tawnytown Road itself. That was not the case back in the day. Even right here, 50 years ago, you would have seen motels, you would have seen modern houses and businesses all up and down this road. Most of them catering to tourists, and like I mentioned earlier, they got ice cream, you had sandwich places, motels, amusements, souvenir shops.
All of which the modern Gettysburg has, but it's been confined mostly to the town.
The one thing that's not in that list of amusements and attractions for the tourists, though,
is any kind of amusement park. It's the one thing that's missing.
but that wasn't always the case. This road in front of us, the one leading from the National Cemetery down here past General Meade's headquarters there, on the right, this very section of the Tawnytown Road was once the home of a theme park. And yes, it was located so close to the battlefield that if it were still here today, you would have seen it in the background as those soldiers were drilling.
It's so close to Meade's headquarters that if it was haunted, General Meade would have had a very short commute.
And today we're gonna visit the site of Gettysburg's legendary lost theme park, Fantasyland. Or technically, more specifically,
Fantasyland 1863. And no, despite that name, it wasn't a Civil War themed theme park.
it was a storybook style fantasy theme park, not unlike Walt Disney's Fantasyland in Disneyland.
The entrance was just literally yards down the Tawnytown Road
From where we were standing up there at the camp, right here where today,
cars now turn off the Tawnytown Road and into the entrance
of the Gettysburg National Military Park's new visitor center. That's right, unbelievably, this is where you used to head straight in to a parking lot for a theme park. You would never guess that by looking around today.
This new visitor center is visited today by thousands and thousands of people. And for very good reason. It contains an epic theater and an even more epic museum
with all kinds of authentic Civil War memorabilia and artifacts,
which we looked at last time we were here and went inside the museum. But what most people don't know when they come to the visitor center is that in the late 1950s, this land, 23 acres of it,
was purchased by husband and wife team Kenneth and Thelma Dick to build Fantasyland.
It was billed as a fabulous, magical wonderland of make-believe, a quaint, charming village of yesterday in a peaceful setting provided by Mother Nature. And it was every bit as awesome as the pamphlet promised. Now, the modern-day visitor center sits on the land that Fantasyland once occupied, but not quite on the site.
If we want to get a better look at old Fantasyland, you have to actually enter the visitor center and then walk out the back door,
where once upon a time in the land of fantasy, this view off the back balcony looked a lot more like this. There were two large man-made lakes located just outside of the back of the modern visitor center today.
And as you can see from the old postcards here, there were paddle boats,
beautiful walking trails, flowers everywhere. In fact, you can even see the pink scenic tour train in the background, which was just one of an eventual 100 attractions at this place,
most of which were located in the woods behind the visitor center, and all of which, for a lover of kitsch and Americana, were amazing. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves because those man-made lakes back here would have been the bottom or the back of the park. And to get to the entrance where I can show you some of the other attractions they had out here,
we're gonna need to head over to Parking Lot 3.
Parking Lot 3 is the unpopular one because it's located the farthest away from the visitor center, and there's quite a long trail through the woods to get back and forth, which we'll get to later. But the back part of this parking lot was originally the parking lot for
Fantasyland.
Now, you remember that entrance I showed you off the Tawnytown Road. Nowadays, that road takes this big right turn and sort of loops around the parking lot. But back in the day, it used to just go straight in,
where now they've built up that big hill to block the view of the unsightly parking lot from the battlefield, of course.
But if you climb all the way up the rising ground to the back of the parking lot and turn around and face the woods and the visitor center, you would be looking across the old parking lot into the entrance of Fantasyland. Right down below us, against the left side of those woods, was the Fantasyland entrance building, which fittingly for a storybook park was shaped like a giant storybook.
Just look at that incredible entrance. Who wouldn't want to enter that land of fantasy? You could see some fairy tale buildings beyond and the top of a castle.
And if you were a kid standing here looking that way in the summer of 1959 when Fantasyland opened, you'd be losing your mind with excitement.
Here's a slightly different picture of the same scene from a little later on in its history. You can see the Fantasyland entrance has grown a little bit.
But if you were around back then, hopefully you didn't grow too much, because the interesting thing about that entrance
is that it was supposedly only 5 feet high, and if you had to bend down to get inside, you paid the adult price.
But if you could walk straight in without bending your neck down, you got the kids' price.
Once you walked inside that magical doorway, you were greeted by the icon, the symbol of the park, Mother Goose. You can see her pictured here with one of her children, and she was more than 20 feet tall and actually would speak to the visitors and the little children coming to Fantasyland via, of course, a park employee hidden away in a little building nearby.
One of Dwight Eisenhower's grandchildren, Anne, worked at Fantasyland, and I believe she provided the voice for Mother Goose sometimes.
Sadly, in 1968, that speaker shorted out, and Mother Goose's head actually burned down. But not to worry, she quickly got a facelift, which is why she looks different in later photos from the park.
They say it smelled like roast goose for miles around.
Now, standing there in front of Mother Goose, if you had turned to your left, you would have seen the show shoe, or as it's better known, the old shoe, home of course to the old woman who lived in a shoe. No sign of the old woman herself, but you can see her children playing and tap dancing up there on the roof. And as you can see, it was a busy neighborhood. Here's the fairy princess standing nearby in the foreground. There were a lot of classic characters here. You could visit Little Miss Muffet or Humpty Dumpty. Jack's house was nearby. Not sure if that was Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Ah, wait a minute, I see. It's the house that Jack built. So it could be any of them, because I don't know that nursery rhyme. Or Jack and Jill, I'll have to get back to you on that, but why look at any of those? When if you're anything like me, your attention would have been taken up entirely by the castle. Rapunzel's castle, in fact, designed by none other than the park's founder, Kenneth Dick himself. And I love how thin and folksy it sort of looks there. You know, it looks like a piece of folk art. And it's crazy to think that all of this was located in this lower portion of today's parking lot and a little bit into these woods here, which just look impregnable today. I mean, there's so much flora in there, so much foliage and leafness. I don't have a picture of Rapunzel with her castle, but for some reason, I do have this photo of Raggedy Ann at Rapunzel's castle. Oh, that's right. Raggedy Ann and Andy were characters you could meet here at Fantasyland. Wow, Raggedy Ann looks really tall in that photo. Now, the deeper you went into Fantasyland, the farther back in these woods you'd be in the modern day. And like I said, it is really thick and jungly in there. There's bees, there's ticks, there's wood lice. Maybe? I don't know. Plus, this is a national park. And remember, there's a lot of keep on the trail, keep off the grass type signs. So at first you're thinking, oh man, there's no way to get into the old site of Fantasyland. But don't forget about that trail through the woods to the visitor center. That passes not only through Fantasyland this way, but if you turn to your left over here, there's actually a separate path that follows along the edge of the parking lot through the woods this way as well. I think we'll head back on the main route to the visitor center first, but don't forget that this bottom portion of the parking lot here was Fantasyland. We'd be standing in and among the attractions, even right here. It was a big place from the word go. 23 acres in 1959, and was later expanded back all the way to where the visitor center is now, totaling 35 acres near the end. Whew. It is hot out here. It's a good time to head into the wooded parts because the shade is very much appreciated. Now, something to keep in mind, Kenneth and Thelma Dick's whole thing when they built this park was that they had visited a storybook park in New Jersey in 1957 and thought, we could do better than this. We could do something so much cuter. They wanted it to be bigger, better, and cleaner. Not to mention more beautiful than other run-of-the-mill storybook parks. And they were committed to keeping it growing and growing and growing. In fact, it was much more spread out than I ever really thought. I just had the very good luck to run into John Hoptick from the National Park Service, who knows a lot about Fantasyland, and Tim Smith from the Adams County Historical Society, who was just telling me that back here towards the end of the trail, he thinks he remembers butted up against Mother Nature Lake that used to be right over here, like I told you earlier, was the lollipop tree. And that thing looks absolutely gigantanormous. Ooh, and underneath, bonus, you can see Bimbo the Clown, I believe. Now, I had read, and I had figured from walking around that the site was fully bulldozed, and for the most part it was. Like, earth was moved around and all that stuff. But they were saying that somewhere in the woods, they have actually managed to find rocks and things that match up to old pictures. So not all of it was completely terraformed. And that means that indeed this little island here in this junction could have been the home of the lollipop tree. And if you look at the lollipop tree up in the background, you can see the sky ride that they added here. That's right, a full-on Swiss sky ride, much like the Skyway at Disneyland, became one of the attractions here, along with that pink scenic tour train, the Cannonball Express, which was a little train here at the park that I wish was still here because I'd like to get off my aching feet for a little while. Every theme park has to have its train, of course. There was also a caboose park back there, a merry-go-round, a fire engine, fountains, a big red barn. There was a helicopter ride, a donut derby ride, which I've never heard of before in my life. And look at that. That's Panda the bear right there, with Reginald the dog behind him. Most theme parks have one or two mascots. I mean, the Disney parks are sort of an exception because there's a lot of different Disney characters there. Maybe Knott's Berry Farm has the Peanuts gang, you know, but for most places it's like one or two. I'm thinking of Gilroy Gardens with
Gil Garlic or whatever. But Fantasyland was littered with characters like Barney the Bear Cop over here. You couldn't move for him. Here's Petunia the Skunk with Reggie the Dog again. Here's another later pamphlet with Panda the Bear back on the cover. And boy, check out that Fantasyland logo. I am gonna make a t-shirt of that. I think my favorite though has got to be Freddy the Frog, just because he's so creepy and kind of weird looking. Look at him back there riding on the Donut Derby ride. Ooh, that frog looked like he was up to no good. And don't forget, they had Raggedy Ann and Andy, they had Rapunzel, they had various princesses. But I think the most popular character had to be the big man himself, Santa Claus, who had an entire Santa town at Fantasyland that I was told was located just up this way. It's very hard to figure out where everything is because the paths are not the original paths. They follow sort of a similar shape. But of course, there would have been crisscrossing paths all throughout this area, so the map that I have doesn't line up. I wish I'd have brought more stuff with me. Basically, though, on the big side trail, you start going up a big hill. Now, Tim Smith said he thought there were remnants of the buildings here, maybe foundations or something. But I put pants on. That's how you know it was getting serious. Cruised up here onto the hill. I don't see much. It's pretty overgrown. I mean, honestly, Santa himself could be sitting right there in front of me and I would never see him if he was under these leaves. Let's try a little further down now. Anyway, Santa Town was awesome. Not only could you meet Santa Claus himself and maybe Mrs. Claus and some of the helpers and see animatronic elves, which were purchased from fancy window display suppliers when they were building this place, but they also had a Winter Wonderland dark ride that actually pumped air conditioning into it, which was pretty fancy in the 60s, So there was a dark ride here, and you would actually feel cold when you went to the North Pole in Santa Town. You could see on either side of the path. You just see it now that we're kind of cross-country into the woods with all the ticks and the spiders. But there are a lot of big old landmark boulders up here. So if you had enough old photographs, you might be able to line something up. But I think you'd kind of need a bunch of people searching. And I think at that point, when you had a bunch of people wandering around up the hillside, you'd probably want to get somebody's permission. The space that's got the most space between the trees is definitely the hill closest to the visitor center. So I'm going to assume this is where Santa's town had to have been. I want to do some more adventuring in there and keep searching if there's any hope of seeing a foundation or whatever, but there's a thunderstorm rolling in and the thunder is getting more and more constant. So I think I might move along from Santaland just for a little. I should mention some other attractions while we're walking around back here, like the gingerbread house. That, in addition to the sugar plum snack bar, supplied you with all kinds of treats. And there was also a big red apple you could climb into and learn all about Johnny Appleseed, who is not the guy with the apple. That is Mr. Muscleman. And apparently when you talked to him on the telephone, as it says, his muscle would actually flex. Weird. Now, I'm assuming that was some sort of corporate sponsorship type of thing because I believe Muscleman is an applesauce maker. Am I crazy about that? So I think Muscleman has something to do with apples. It'd be sort of like having a jolly green giant green bean somewhere in your theme park. The storm is getting a lot closer. At first, I thought they were firing cannons on the battlefield, but then it became too constant. Doesn't look good over there, but that's the way we're heading, over the road here next to the visitor center and away from the old site of Mother Nature Lake, which of course had all those paddle boats and all that stuff. In fact, Tim Smith was thinking that if you were to stand back at the Lollipop Tree Junction we were at before and turn around, that this view would somewhat match this view here on the pamphlet, that the boathouse would be somewhere kind of on the left here near the theater or, kind of up in this area. And then the ponds would have gone that way. Anyway, now we're going beyond the ponds, over the road, into these woods here. The ones just over the entrance road from parking lot 3 there. And actually, before we head in there, look backwards towards the visitor center. See this kind of wetland area? It's part of one of the old ponds, the man-made ponds that were out here. Crazy. Anyway, these woods over the road were the home of another one of Fantasyland's famous attractions. Somewhere in here, supposedly, this area in here in these woods was home to another one of Fantasyland's famous attractions, the infamous
Fort Apache. They would have cowboys and Indians there at the quote-unquote authentic fort. It would actually be lit on fire as part of the show, and a fire truck would come and put it out. In fact, there was even a ride, the Fantasyland wagon train, that would take you towards Fort Apache, or near Fort Apache, that the natives would attack. And if you look there, you could see some of the natives in that picture, as they were called. I don't think you'd get away with that one today. Look at this. This is interesting. I do not see any remnants of a log fort, of course. But look at these. There are stone walls that are concreted together. Look at that. Holy cow. We have actually found pieces of Fantasyland right here, just off the road, even. That's crazy. I don't know exactly what part of it this would be. Look at this. This looks like a concrete tree trunk right there. Oh, no way. A little piece of theming survives out here. Look at, you can see this is all shaped like different stuff. Wow. Now in the photos I have, I definitely don't see any stone foundations to Fort Apache. So this has to belong to some other attraction here. But there is no doubt in my mind, we are looking at an original piece of Fantasyland 1863. It's hard to work with people's memories. I gotta find some more maps and things, you know, before I visit Gettysburg again. I hope that's just wind and not rain coming. Nope, that is definitely rain. Rain, wind, thunder, lightning. I think it's time to seek shelter in good old parking lot number 3. Oh man, there's a lot of dust in the air. Yep, I was complaining about the heat earlier, but this is worse. Get back to the van, laddie. Run for your life. That is no fair, dude. That is coming in sideways. Uh-oh. I could actually see some of that lightning and it was not far away, so let's get under cover. Whoa. The whole van is shaking. Whoa, Nelly. Whew, avast. There be squalls ahead. All right, well, while we wait out the rain, whoa. Crikey. Ooh, I should tell you that this currently terrifying scene of desolation once used to have plays and professional puppet shows. Look at that, it's so weird. The sun is shining and the van is still rocking back and forth with the wind and getting pelted with periodic bouts of rain. And because Dwight D. Eisenhower and his wife Mamie, President Eisenhower, lived in Gettysburg after he was out of the White House, his grandchildren were frequent visitors of Fantasyland, along with the children of John F. Kennedy. In 1963, they even brought their mom out here, I'm told. I'm also told that they loved it, and those kids could have gone anywhere they wanted. So that's high praise. Look at this, it's wet all the way to the back of the van on everything, even the steering wheel. Ooh, hear that? Jeez, even the steering wheel is wet. Some locals were coming, they were talking to me through the door. I was like, guys, just come in the van. They're like, no, we don't want to bug you. Look at that. It's wet everywhere. Yet the sun is already shining on half of the van and the other half is in darkness. So I'm sure in like 15 minutes, we're going to be outside and it's going to be gorgeous again. Ah, moist. All right, well, it took a little while. Came and went and came and went. But we appear now to be in the went phase of it, at least for the moment. That's the good and the bad thing about scattered thunderstorms, right? They go, but then they come back again. So I guess we'll have to leave further exploration of the Fort Apache woods for a future visit. But we're not quite done though, because on the other side of the parking lot, what would have been to the left of the Fantasyland entrance, was their zany zoo where you could pet Mary's little lamb, see the real Peter Rabbit, and even catch a glimpse of some monkeys, one of which apparently escaped at some point and had to be tracked down by the Gettysburg police. But that's not why I'm leading you back into the woods over in the direction that the Zany Zoo used to be. I'm leading you this way because I tried to save the best for last. And if we have to wrap things up now, I want to show you the one thing that both the historians I talked to today are confident actually came from Fantasyland. So we are for sure going to see one little remaining piece, a piece you don't have to go off trail to see. Just inside the woods here, I mean just feet away from the parking lot, this path crosses the little stream that wound throughout Fantasyland. And if you look very carefully, you'll notice that you actually pass over a small stone bridge, which was not built by the National Park Service. This was once a piece, a small remaining piece of the Fantasyland theme park. And if you look carefully, all down around the creek bed here, all around this pipe and the little stone bridge, you'll catch glimpses of old PVC and metal pipes. These are also leftover detritus from the park. And over here, very randomly sticking out of the ground, you'll see a piece of wire that's also leftover from the old Fantasyland days. So what happened? Why isn't Fantasyland still here? After all, as we've seen, Gettysburg is still full of visitors. There are thousands of them coming every year. Well, if you remember all the way back to the beginning of this, before we really started exploring the site, I showed you just how close this is to the National Cemetery, which is just beyond those trees, to General Meade's headquarters. From the very beginning, that meant a lot of preservationists and historians were very upset that this park was located here. There were articles about it being a blight on sacred soil. In fact, even before the park opened, Kenneth Dick had to pen a defensive letter to the New York Times explaining that he was a Marine veteran of World War II, a Purple Heart recipient, and that they were going to build their park tucked as much as possible out of view into this forest here, which was only supposedly used as a bivouac site, or basically as an army campsite, so no part of the big battle took place on the land, supposedly. But in 1974, after 15 or 16 seasons of being open, the National Park Service did what all those preservationists couldn't do and put an end to Fantasyland. Sort of. What they did was offer $1.4 million to the Dick family for the land, an offer they felt like they just couldn't refuse. It was just too much money to turn down. And remember, this is the 1970s, so $1 million was, worth a lot more than it is today, especially today. But they made an agreement with the family that they could continue to run Fantasyland on the property for 10 more years. So it should have ran until 1984. But in 1980, they received another offer from a theme park in Ohio to purchase their rides and some of the big statues, even old Mother Goose for other theme parks. And after 22 amazing, wonderful, magical seasons out here, Fantasyland was closed. It was bulldozed. All the rides and attractions were removed, and they've all been scattered to the four winds now. Nobody really knows where all those rides are today. And then in 2008, of course, the National Park Service built their new visitor center and museum and theater here on the property, completely transforming it even more. And as we've seen, very little trace of it remains. Dude, this is spooky out here. The visitor center's closed now. It's after 5 o'clock, and after that storm, everybody seems to have skedaddled. There's kind of spooky vibes here, just walking along the creeks, which they use to full effect in Fantasyland. So this was the place, the magical place for all those kids of Gettysburg. You know how cool it would have been in 1959 to have your own Disneyland, your own Fantasyland in your backyard like this. It must have been incredible. In the grand scheme of things, it's for the best. I mean, the museum and the visitor center are amazing. And of course, we want American battlefields to be preserved and to look as much as possible like they did back when the battles happened. So the American history fan in me is happy with the outcome, but the theme park history fan, the roadside attraction fan in me is like, oh, I wish we still had Fantasyland out here, Now, I was told today that descendants of Thelma and Kenneth Dick still live in town. They're still running businesses here. So I have to assume that there are a lot more photos and old video out there to discover in the future. If any of you have any photos of Fantasyland or old 8mm footage or anything like that, I would love to hear from you, because this is one topic from the past I would love to explore more in the future. For now, though, my friends, I am sunburned and itchy from romping around through the woods, and I think that's it for my visit to Fantasyland. However, if you enjoyed this and you want to hear more about Fantasyland, there was a lecture given about Fantasyland by a ranger named John Hopdick of the National Park Service, which is on the Gettysburg National Military Park YouTube channel. And I think the podcast Addressing Gettysburg, great name, also posted that lecture, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely go check that out. Also, make sure to check out the Adams County Historical Society. Tim Smith, who stopped and talked to me today, has a lot of great lectures and videos on there. As you see, Gettysburg is a deep, deep rabbit hole. Not just the battle, but the town, the tourist attractions, so much history here of all different kinds. All right, well, we're back in good old parking lot 3, walking backwards through
the area where the old Fantasyland Entrance building once stood.
Thank you for joining me on my journey through Gettysburg's forgotten theme park.
And remember, I still have to cross the entire country in that van back there that I'm not sure exactly is going to make it, so there are plenty of adventures ahead. And now, my friends, make sure you check out our sick merch, store.randomland.com. We've got Instagram, we've got Patreon, we've got all kinds of stuff. Make sure you're subscribed and ring the bell for notifications and all that kind of stuff, and you'll have done your duty, just like I have. And now we can go home and sleep well.
Those poor soldiers. They probably got soaked. Oh, man.
Was Fort Apache. Did you hear that? That was not a cannonball. That is lightning, my friends. Oh no, you guys. Those soldiers are dead. Dead tired. We've got a Confederate here and a Union soldier. They're about to run into each other. Nothing